So, you're... The blonde faunus looked left and right to make sure no one was listening, but Blake had already chosen a table far away from any other customers. White Fang? White Fang. Blake frowned. I left before Beacon, and I don't intend to go back. Then where do you intend to go? A treacherous mind whispered. Back to Beacon? Where half your team hates your guts? Or are we running away? Again. Blake resisted the urge to shake her head. She wasn't going to start talking to herself in the middle of a caf. And if Sun wanted to treat her to food, who was she to argue? Her stomach growled hungrily, and she could just imagine the delicious food that could have been hers at Beacon. She could have gone back too. She was a student there and it wasn't as though she had officially quit. All she had to do was sneak in, avoid her team, and probably Ruby's team too, and grab some food. But she didn't dare take the risk, too terrified of running into her team, of seeing Yang's pain, Weiss's condemnation, or those empty blue eyes which seemed to look straight through her. Those eyes that seemed to say he knew her every thought, and that he placed judgment upon her. Won't your team worry about you? Sun asked, and Blake realized she missed his last comment. Yang might. That's my partner, the blonde. But I don't think Weiss would trust me anymore. And? Sun prodded, when she trailed off uselessly. I don't think my team leader ever trusted me. Ouch. Doesn't sound like a good leader if you can't trust the team. See? I didn't get on with the guys when we first met. Once I gave them a chance, they were pretty cool. Now we're tight. He has a good reason to hate me though, Sun. She said softly. So many good reasons. For one, he knew I was a White Fang operative from the very start. Why hadn't he said or done something she didn't know? If he hated her so much, then he had plenty of opportunity to ruin her. But he instead settled for little snipes and hints, along with his annoying habit of forgetting her name. It just didn't make sense. He either hated her, or he didn't. But if he didn't, then why mention what he had last night? And if he did hate her, why not tell everyone sooner? It made her head hurt. It made her sick with worry. Sun pointed a fork at her. You sure that's enough to make him hate you? We met when my partner was about to blow up a train with his family on it. Sun blinked. The fork and piece of cake on it still held suspended between them. She tried to say it casually, but Sun's reaction said it all, really. Well, I guess that would do it. My partner at the time was the only one who wanted to do that, but I couldn't go through with it. That was the moment I decided to quit. Blake wanted to tell him that they weren't always like that, or how they'd once fought a peaceful battle for equality, but the words felt empty. They had once, sure, but when Adam had pressed for more immediate results, she'd been one of his greatest supporters. Peaceful hadn't worked. It didn't get results, but violence did. She'd been so naive back then. Just a small child who didn't realize what violence really was. By the time she had found out, it had already been too late. When things first became violent, I thought it meant self-defense, or that we'd break into mining camps to rescue faunus, fighting our way out. I imagined it would be a revolution of some honorable battle we could be proud of. Sun tried to smile, but it looked weak. Instead, we weren't defending anything, nor were we mounting daring rescues. We didn't attack SDC convoys to secure money to help the faunus. We attacked to secure prisoners we could use as bargaining chips. And as everyone knows, Atlas doesn't negotiate with terrorists. And as the world had soon come to learn, Adam did not make idle threats. So you left. So I left. Well, that's good enough, isn't it? Sun laughed as she spooned some cake into her mouth. You can't keep berating yourself up about what happened in the past. Thing is, you want to change and make a difference now. I guess. If only the world was so simple a place. The desire to right the wrong she'd done before, it was an admirable thing. But did it redeem her for what she'd done? If a serial killer suddenly found their conscience and dedicated their life to helping orphans? Did those good deeds wash away the bad? Blake wasn't so sure. But the thing is, this argument all came about as a result of rumors that the White Fang had been working with Torchwick. Something I knew they wouldn't do. Deny it all you want. Jaune's words from the previous evening came back to her, making her wince. She would prove him wrong as well. She had to. It was the only way she'd be able to go back and face them. And if they are working with Torchwick? Sun asked, leaning forward on one elbow. She wanted to say they wouldn't, to proclaim that the situation wouldn't come up. But he had told her to stop lying to herself. And maybe he was right. Had she been running away just like she always did? Except this time, running from the truth. No more. She wouldn't run away anymore. Not if it meant giving Jean Arc the satisfaction of being right. If they are, she took a breath, releasing it as her eyes narrowed. Then I'll stop them myself. The monkey fauna sighed, rubbing one hand across his face as he leaned back in his seat, his tail come up, a mug held in it as he took a quick sip. Then I guess I'm coming with you too then. I'm doing fine. Lavender raised her eyes towards the sky, as though to ask for divine patience from his constant badgering. Jean had been more willing to put up with it if he'd actually spoken to her at all that week. I'm red because it's a hot day. I haven't been wearing myself out. I never said that. Jean said. I just asked why you look so tired. You do every time you see me looking the slightest bit out of breath, big brother. Only a year or so younger than him and already so sassy. Where had he gone wrong? I take it you didn't call just to accuse me of not looking after myself? There was a warning there as well, one that he would not be silly enough to fall into. Is my little sister accusing me, her favorite brother, of such horrible things? He swooned, one hand held to his forehead. Why? I just wanted to talk with my beautiful sister. Such flattery. Lavender fluttered her eyelashes at him. It makes me think you're about to tell me you've done something wrong. Wait, oh god, you haven't gotten someone pregnant, have you? Your brother knows how to put on a condom. Jean deadpanned, enjoying the way her face twisted in disgust. Trust me, I've had enough practice. Too much information, Jean. Please. Jean laughed at the color of her skin, normally pale than was usually healthy, but looking a little green to boot. She tried to frown at him, but she just wasn't built for it, and the gesture just came out more like a cute pout. I do have some good news, though. Unless Sapphire already ruined the surprise, that is. She did. Or rather, Amber overheard her telling Mum and Dad about it and quickly ran around the house screaming about how you're being expelled. It was quite the odd experience, actually. A little brat. So much for any hopes of keeping it a secret. But he supposed there was no harm. Sapphire said it depends on you not doing anything to ruin it. Pretty much. So long as I don't do anything to make myself stand out, I should be free of vegan come next weekend. Convenient timing. Since we're all coming down the Vale to see you. That little snippet had his eyes going wide. Wait, you are? Why? To see you, of course, silly. She giggled, one hand across her lips. Did you think we'd leave you alone in Vale on your school holidays? He did, and it must have shown on his face, for she gave him a disappointed smile. You're a stupid older brother. But I suppose you're mine, so I have to put up with it. Things aren't the same here without you, Jean. We've all been excited to see you again, so of course we'd want to come and visit you. His breath came out in one great sigh, shoulders relaxing as he felt warmth flow through him. Such unconditional love. He was still getting used to it. Even after spending the last 2 years with them. All it took was some unexpected words and he'd freeze up. It's going to be Amber's birthday as well, so make sure you get her something nice. I will. I definitely will. Something other than you saying that you managed your expulsion. You can't cheat your way out of this, Jaune. I won't? Eesh. Such little faith you have. Lavender leaned forward, narrowing one eye as she stared at him. For such a frail girl, she sure knew how to put the pressure on, likely because she knew no one would retaliate in kind for fear of hurting her. Jaune's head perked up as he heard the door to the room slam open, 2 figures pushing their way in. Sorry, Lav. I've gotta go. I'll see you later, okay? You'll see me next week, silly. Love you, Jaune. You too. The screen flashed black as he put it away, standing to address his teammates. Any luck finding her? None, Wise said, shaking her head as she flopped down onto her bed. Yang looked like she wanted to say something but took one look at him and clamped her jaw shut. She was still angry, of course. He hadn't expected any less. I take it that wasn't Blake? Yang asked needlessly, glaring up at him. I haven't heard from her. Well, thanks for not getting distracted or anything. Yang spat sarcastically, leaving the room and slamming the door behind her. He wished he could tell her Blake would be okay, but she had no reason to believe it as anything other than a vacant attempt to cheer her up. Jaune winced again, as his head throbbed with pain. Those painkillers he'd taken hadn't done anything to help. We've just come for some food, Wise said. Yang's still upset. I can tell. He grunted, still rubbing his temples to try and massage the pain away. Wise tried for a smile, but shrugged when it never came out properly. Who were you talking to? My sisters. We're making plans for the end of semester. No need to tell Wise what those plans were. She had enough to worry about. It didn't really matter anyway. Wise hummed, making it clear she was just making conversation to distract herself. For a few minutes there was no other sound in the room, other than the ticking of the clock on the nearby wall and the dull beat in his head. You should come with us, Wise said, not quite meeting his eyes. What good would that do? Do you even know what you'll do if you find her? He asked, making the girl wince slightly. That was the ultimate irony in a sense, wasn't it? Wise was still angry at Blake, still betrayed and upset. Yet despite it all, she continued to search for her. The young girl had no idea what she would do or whether she would be able to forgive the fondness. But the irony was, Jaune did. Jaune knew she would forgive Blake, that she would welcome her back and become one of the girl's closest and most trusted friends. Yang and Blake had always been best friends, but that seemed to be on an emotional level, the two teasing and baiting one another. Blake and Wise were closer in a different way, an intellectual one of two people who could associate and talk with one another about sensitive issues. Wise gave Blake an outlet from Yang's puns and carefree attitude, while Blake gave Wise the same from Ruby. I was angry when she admitted it. Wise started. Unbelievably angry. I couldn't even think, or maybe that was all I could think about. It didn't matter what her reasons were, or what made her decide to leave them. Only that she lied to me all this time. She turned to him. Do you think she had a good reason to? Everyone has reasons. Jaune shrugged. Some are good, some bad, and others don't even make sense. But we all have reasons to do what we do. Even you? He shrugged. I'm no different. You just wouldn't be able to understand mine. I never used to hate the White Fang, Wise said, laying back a little on her bed so that her head rested on the pillow. Our family had honest maids and servants who were well paid and happy. Father only got rid of them after the first problems occurred, and even then only because one of the butlers let the Fang in. She laughed softly. I remember being so upset because I used to love the woman who was my nanny, and they were taking her away as well. She didn't do anything wrong. I think she would have died before letting anyone hurt me. It would have been so easy to hate her father, Jaune thought, but like he had said, there were reasons for everything. If the man feared for the life of his daughter, was any decision to be considered too drastic? It never got better though. If anything, the firings made things worse because people took it as a sign that we all hated faunus. The mines are low-paid work and it's dangerous. I know, but we don't put out job adverts for just faunus. It's just the faunus are the only ones desperate enough for the work, because they can't get jobs anywhere else in Atlas. I know that's no excuse, but we're not targeting them on purpose. What kind of business do you imagine would purposely try and kill their workforce? Why would anyone think we would? People look for someone to blame. Jaune ignored her as she looked towards him in surprise. Humans. Faunus. We all need something to hate when it comes down to it. To blame our little problems on. A single company is easier to hate than an entire government. Or worse. A culture. That doesn't make sense. I told you some people's reasons don't make sense. All that matters is that it makes sense to them. Why do you think Blake ran away? Weiss asked. Jaune spared a glance for her, now propped up on one elbow and looking at him. He felt tired already. But maybe that was the stress talking. His nerves were on edge too. With only a week left until his freedom. If fate, or whatever it was to get in the way, then it would happen soon. He didn't need to answer her. In fact, part of him wondered if he would be better off staying silent. But the way she asked it wasn't like Weiss to ask others for help or advice. This must have been weighing on her far heavier than he'd first thought. Jaune's eyes softened a little as he decided to give her just a little bit of advice. She would make the right decision, like he always did. But maybe he could help her a little. Who knows? He shrugged. He knew. Maybe it's because she thought everyone would turn on her. Yang wouldn't have. And I don't think you would have either. Oh? Jaune glanced over to her. It's too much effort for you to bother. She said. And the sarcasm in her voice made him laugh lightly. She was right, in a roundabout way. He would never forgive Blake, for there had never been anything to forgive. Why bother making a fuss out of something you weren't even upset about? But I guess it doesn't matter what we think, because Blake thought she had to run. Her reasons were enough for her. Why sounded so sad, likely because she'd been unable to list herself and those who would have forgiven their missing teammate. Weiss knew, or at least thought she knew, that Blake would never trust her. With a sigh, Jaune braced his shoulders and went for the distraction. If I knew making some crap like this up would be enough to keep you quiet, I'd have done it a long time ago. What was that? She was sitting up and leveling a glare at him. Jaune hid his smile, pleased despite himself to see her a little livelier. I never said I was taking your advice to heart. Goodness knows you have to be the worst example of human empathy I've ever seen. Someone lacking empathy struggles to understand the emotions of others, right? I think you're pretty angry right now. Did I get that right? Weiss didn't answer, or at least not in the vocal sense. Instead, a pillow bounced off his face as she huffed and rolled over, presenting her back to him. He thought about pointing out that the way she was laying made her skirt right up, but he shook his head and turned over, granting his partner some privacy instead. I'm not going to give up on her. Jaune heard the girl roll over once more, but he remained as he was. I'm not going to give up on Blake that easily. I never expected you to. I'm going to find her, then I'm going to force the answers out of her. Jaune blinked. Okay, not quite as lovey-dovey as he imagined. Maybe the whole forgiveness thing had been more of a last-minute thing from Weiss in the other lifetimes. Not that it mattered. It always played out the same. Team Ruby always came back together. A lance of pain burned through his skull, making him grip his head in both hands. Just a headache. Ignore me. What were you asking? Won't you come with us? You say you don't know why Blake left either. Why not try and find the answer? Jaune wanted to sigh, but his head was pounding too much and he instead just grunted. For someone to want an answer, there has to be a question they want to ask. There's nothing I feel I need to ask her. He already knew her reasons. What more was there? Why do you hate the White Fang? Weiss asked. Jaune sighed, bringing his arms up over his head, both to block the bright light from his eyes, but also in a vague attempt to ignore the question. He could feel those pale eyes boring into the back of his head though. Who says I have any particular reason to dislike them? You did. Last night. I said they were scum, along with a few other things. Most people tend to have a poor opinion of terrorists. It's hardly anything special. Weiss laughed. Anything that can get a reaction like that out of you, it's definitely special. About the only emotion I've been able to squeeze out of you is at various stages of distress at training. Do you want more? He asked, grinning. The pain had started to dull a little into what was just a normal, ignorable headache. I could go for wildly in love, if that helps. Maybe I could call you my snow angel. The sound she made might have been something between a cough, a shout, and someone trying to swallow a watermelon whole. It wasn't something he'd ever heard from her before, and he desperately wished he could see the look on her face. Call me something like that and I'll show you real distress. I can't imagine how annoying you would be if you acted like some love-struck fool. Who knows? Maybe I tried my hardest and do everything you say in an attempt to impress you. I might even appear outside your door to serenade you. Weiss snorted in quite the unladylike manner. It doesn't sound like you at all. Yeah, it doesn't. Jaune smiled sadly. He hadn't been like that for so long now. Enough time they could only vaguely remember that he'd once harbored such feelings for the girl. That and the nagging reminder in his head had been absolutely insufferable about it. To the point that he'd somehow been able to miss Pyrrha's rather blatant attempts at catching his attention. And how he could fail to spot her feelings. He had no idea. I must have been a complete wreck back then. Still, it was sad to imagine how much he'd changed. Though perhaps that was inevitable. Nothing stayed the same, or so it was for normal people. It felt somehow stranger for him, since he changed so much over the repeats, while everyone he knew remained the same. Of course they wouldn't change. To them, it was only ever a year or two. Is our team really so annoying to you? The question caught him by surprise, so lost in thought as he was, but it was an opportunity nonetheless. Weiss was the last bastion of support he had. Yes, Jaune said. He couldn't see her, and that was for perhaps the best. She might have seen the deceit in his eyes. Blake's a terrorist. Yang's a violent psychopath, and you nag me all the time. Would have to be an absolute masochist to like it here. Do you hate us that much? Don't sound so sad about it. Jaune flinched behind his arms. I do. He lied. It came out in a quiet breath, leaving nothing but the beating of his heart in his ears. He wondered what she would do. Would she shout and yell at him, accuse him of being a monster? He deserved it all. But it had to be done. The cut had to be cleaned so they wouldn't be in agony when he left. If this was how bad they were when Blake vanished for 2 days, he couldn't let his expulsion cripple them. Liar. Jaune froze. The tone of Weiss's voice. It wasn't angry. It was more disappointed. He turned over in bed to look at her, in time to see the frustrated look she gave him. You're such a liar, Jaune Arc. If you truly didn't care, then you wouldn't do half the things you do. You wouldn't have stepped in to have Yang help Velvet. I only did that because I couldn't be bothered to listen to all your whining. You also wouldn't have put up with Ruby. She's enough to even annoy Yang sometimes. Yet, you act like an indulgent big brother willing to listen to her no matter how bad she is. She's just a kid, and you wouldn't have tried to help Yang at Forever 4. You wouldn't have sat here and listened to me now, or accepted any of the training I forced you through, and you definitely wouldn't have helped Blake like you did. Helped her? He laughed, trying to force as much scorn into his voice as possible. Are we even talking about the same person? I don't think I've done much to help someone stuck out on her own in Vale. He expected Weiss to give in, that she would bristle in anger, but instead she grinned like a shark. You didn't stay for Blake's confession. Weiss continued, never once looking away from him. You left before she said what she had done, yet you haven't once been lost when I talk about her being a terrorist. You knew from the start exactly what she was. From the very first day you met her, you either knew, or Blake somehow felt comfortable enough to tell you. And she definitely didn't need to narrow those down, since the chances Blake would have confided in him were pretty low. Jaune managed to hide his wince only because of the experience, but even then he was kicking himself inside. This was always the problem with time travel, remembering what was specific to this life and not the last, or any number of times before. Weiss had involved him so casually in conversations that he hadn't even thought to consider what he should or shouldn't know. He was only lucky it wasn't something that could have ruined him. I knew she was White Fang, but I don't see what this has to do with anything. You didn't tell anyone, Weiss pointed out. You didn't tell us about it. It wasn't my secret to tell. Strange. The white-haired girl smiled. That you would show so much respect to someone you apparently hate. If I disliked someone half as much as you claim to, I'd have run straight to the headmaster. Jaune clamped his mouth shut. If she was determined to twist his words, then he wouldn't give her any. Perhaps he'd already given her too many. She'd always been sharp, sharper than him. Even with all his extra years. He was a fighter, someone who acted on instinct. He'd gotten better after all this time, but it seemed he still wasn't on her level. If it were me in trouble then, would you also refuse to help? What? Jaune asked, frowning slightly as the girl stared at him. Where's all this coming from? It's a simple question. It should be too easy to answer if you feel like you do. If I was in trouble, would you leave me to suffer? That wasn't fair. It wasn't the same thing and he didn't know what to say. Blake wasn't in trouble. At least not trouble she wouldn't get out of. Jaune also had other things holding him back, like Osmond's offer which still lay on the table. If he explained all that, then Weiss might have understood, but it would have led to other questions as well. Inevitably, they would have just been as difficult to answer, like why he wanted to leave Beacon at all. And here came this headache again, back like a sun burning from the front of his brain. To his infinite relief, the opening of their door saved him from having to reply. Yang pushed her way back into the room, throwing something towards the two. Jaune caught it automatically, looking down at the assorted packets of food on the bed. This isn't what I meant by stopping for dinner. Weiss sighed, but she heard her tear open a packet and start to eat regardless. Jaune turned his over, noticing the way they were filled rations that Beacon made for students going on long missions or treks. I've already eaten, he said. The dried food was full of calories and very nutritious. It tasted like it too. In the horrible way only the healthiest foods could. It was like eating cardboard with a sandstone over the top. Right now it's the last thing he wanted, since he felt more like bashing his head against the wall to make the pain stop. Great, Yang said, Then you'll be full and ready to help us out in Vale. Ruby and Pyrrhus say they've kept an eye out in Beacon, but she hasn't been seen. You're going out again? It's past 7. We'll have an easier time with less people on the streets as it gets darker. It'll give us an advantage. There's that troubling word again. You keep saying us and we. I think you mean you and Weiss. Yang didn't scowl, nor did she get angry. That was the first sign. And one Jaune didn't miss as he sat up on his bed. He'd spent enough time being friends with the girl to know how violent her temper could be, not to mention spotting the signs of it. There was always a calm before the storm with Yang, and you'd have to be a fool to miss it. Nope, she said, echoing her sister, though we suppose that conversation hadn't happened this time. You've had most of the day to yourself. Now you're coming out with us to find Blake. You weren't able to find a thing all day. He tried to be reasonable about it, but the way her skin darkened told him she thought he was rubbing her nose in it. If she doesn't want to be found, then she won't be. How can 2 people, or even 3, be expected to find a single girl across all of Vale? Yeah, well, we have to try. I'm sorry we can't all be like you and not give a shit, but my partner is out there and she needs our help. Weiss winced as Yang's volume increased. Or maybe it was the curse. Jaune wasn't sure. Yang usually had a pretty good grip on her mouth, usually for Ruby's benefit, but it slipped when she got really pissed. You don't know she doesn't. Yang roared. Weiss flinched and looked away, while Jaune weathered the storm as best he could. Heat rolled off her in waves, threatening to smother him. For a moment, he wondered if they might actually come to blows, but it winked out a second later. Please, Jaune. And the soft tone of her voice made him wish she had punched him. If you care for us even the slightest, even if you don't get on with Blake, then please. All I'm asking is a little of your time. The slightest bit of help. Her eyes bore into his. Her irises filled with such emotion that it made him want to die. He could, couldn't he? It wouldn't be that much of a risk, would it? He wanted so badly to get rid of the pain she felt. Yang had always been such a close friend. To see her like this was agonizing. Even the slightest improvement, just a sign you could be a person that others could rely on. It would be enough to assure your place here, Mr. Ark. Jaune swallowed the guilt, the resentment and the desire to help his friend. I can't, Yang. Can't. Can't or won't. The pattern of his sheets was the only thing he could see. Okay then. I guess that's how it is. Not sure what I expected, really. I mean, you don't even want to be here. What? Weiss gasped. I know it's my fault too. Yang ignored her. But I guess I sort of figured I could make it up, or that we could make it work. I was wrong. I get that. It's just, I thought for a minute that things might actually be working out. We were laughing. You hang out with us and you even helped me the other week when Cardin tried to throw sap at me. He felt sick. Anger he was preparing for. It would have been easier to deal with. But the sheer amount of disappointment in her voice made his stomach roll. His headache had become worse, like waves crashing against the shore within his mind. He thought for a moment he might pass out. I guess you tried. Which is more than I'd expected. So yeah, thanks for giving us a go. Yang turned away, walking to the door. She didn't turn as she pulled it open, nor did she look back as she spoke. But if you hate us that much, then you don't need to pretend anymore. Jaune and Weiss were left alone in the room, though from the way she slowly climbed to her feet, he knew it'd soon only be him. Perhaps it was better that way. The room was already suffocating, and that was just with the two of them. What did she mean you don't want to be here? You should catch up with her. He dodged the question expertly. If you don't catch up, then she'll think you're siding with me. Weiss looked like she wanted to argue. She looked at him, then back at the door, before letting out a quick curse and rushing after the other girl. He wanted to say she made the right choice choosing Yang over him, but it still hurt. Well, I fucked that up. He sighed. Gods, he felt so tired. So utterly and thoroughly exhausted. How could it be that this was harder than dying? It didn't make sense that putting himself through this could hurt worse than fighting a losing battle, or watching another lifetime slip away. Death and loss, he was used to. But this felt like the first time in so long in which he'd actually discussed with the people he cared about. Or maybe that was it. Maybe it was so hard because it had been so long since he'd been anything other than their best friend. Someone they could trust on to watch their backs. A teammate they could rely on. It was a far cry from that now. But if he changed his tune, if he had agreed to help them, even if Osmond didn't take it as a sign and still let him leave, it would just end with Yang, Weiss, and Blake hunting him down. They'd travel all the way to Ansel if they had to, just to try and bring him back. He was sure of it. That was just the kind of people they were. Utterly loyal to the people they loved, and so he could not let them love him. That necessity didn't make it hurt any less, however. And of course, they still wouldn't find Blake. She would come back, and this whole situation would be over and done with. But they weren't likely to forget that he stood back and refused to join in. Even if Blake didn't let it bother her, it was clear Yang would never see him the same. My damn head. Jaune groaned, gripping his skull with both hands. Something was wrong. He knew it.